Settle in and grab your popcorn. This is going to be one long video. Hello, my name is Tucker. Today's video is going to be a little less lighthearted than most of my videos. I'm going to be talking about my experience with mental hospitals or psychiatric hospitals. Yeah, I'm going to be delving into a lot of really rather dark experiences that I've had. So, trigger warning for depression, suicide, body eating disorders, all of those things, along with anxiety and PTSD, kind of. I will leave links to all the relevant hotlines in my description. Don't be afraid to reach out to those. I know it seems like, oh, I shouldn't reach out to those because if I'm reaching out to those hotlines, that means I'm really in trouble, but that's not true. I've reached out to these hotlines multiple times and they've been extremely helpful. So now, without further ado, let's get into my experiences. But let's begin. First of all, I have my trusty DSM with all of my little note thingies. Flags, whatever they're called. I don't know. I'm so happy I have this. It took forever for me to buy it, and it was expensive. Or it would have been. I bought it for $5, but if I had bought it at regular price, it would have been $54 freaking dollars, which I'm not paying that. Anywho, where do I even start? Because I mean, mental illness has been a thing that I've dealt with my entire life. And I have so many stories and so many experiences, so I really don't know where to start. But I'll start as early as I can remember experiencing mental illness, which is kindergarten. And I'll try to keep this brief because what I want to talk about is psychiatric hospitals and my experience with them. So I'm just going to give a brief timeline of my mental illness journey. So starting in kindergarten, I went to a private school, and at that age, most kids are pretty anxious and don't want to be separated from their parents. That's kind of normal. And like other kids my age, I was really, really anxious to be away from my parents at school all day. It was not fun for me. But unlike most kids, by the end of the year, I was still having panic attacks every time my mom dropped me off. I couldn't concentrate on school. It was very bad, and I just couldn't focus on anything. It was really bad, and we didn't know why it was happening. And also, this anxiety led to a lot of somatic symptoms. Like, I would get stomach aches all the time. I would get really tired, and all of this, mostly stomach stuff. And we actually pursued that. We thought it was physical. I got so many GI doctors. I got what's it called? I don't remember the name. A procedure where they basically go inside your intestines. I got all of those things, and looking back, I'm like, oh, this was just anxiety the whole time, and we didn't know. But, after kindergarten, my parents decided they wanted to homeschool me and my two siblings, so that anxiety of being at school all day went away, and I thought, okay, this is gone, I'll never have to deal with it again. But then, in 2013, it started coming back. I was around, how old was I? I was 8, maybe 8 or 9, and I started getting to the age where it was now normal for parents to drop you off at parties and drop you off at sleepovers, and once again, that anxiety of being away from my parents came back, and it was even worse this time. There was one day in the winter of maybe 2012 or 2013 when I went to a friend's house, and this was during a snow day, and I ate a brownie, and for some reason that just triggered a panic attack, and I wasn't able to be driven home because it was snowing, and I was so terrified and so upset that it ended up being pretty traumatizing, and I don't like to use that word lightly, but, it was very scary, and after that, I stopped going to that friend's house altogether. I stopped leaving my parents. I basically stopped socializing because I was just so anxious, and it got to a point where I wouldn't leave my parents' side. Like, the worst moment I remember in detail was we were at a museum, and the group was supposed to go to another level, but my mom would just stop to, I think it was either go to the bathroom or put something down. I don't remember, but I refused to leave her side. I was terrified to even go on another level. And it was at that point that I began therapy. And then I was in and out of therapy for the next 5 years. I'm still in therapy to this day, and it is extremely helpful, especially with my current therapist. She's been so helpful, and I'm really grateful. Did I just say grateful? Grateful to her, and she's helped me make so much progress that I never expected to make. But, back to the timeline. I had my first therapist, Miss T, and then I stopped going to her. Then I had Miss J, stopped going to her. Then Miss E, who if you have seen any of my good reviews, and a couple of them, I talk about Miss E because basically it's such a long story. I could make a whole video. Basically, there was a lot of miscommunication, and I ended up stop seeing her because she called CPS on my parents, again, because of miscommunication. There wasn't any abuse or neglect or any of that stuff. It was just an awful miscommunication, and, well, okay, I'm getting mixed up. There's so much to tell. Let me just start at the starting point for when I went to the hospital, which is December of 2018. In December of 2018, I sunk into a depression. I don't know why. Some of my doctors have said it was the medicine. Some have said it was winter, a seasonal depression. We don't really know. We don't know why it happened. It just happened. And I think it was around December 18th when I first tried to take my own life, and trigger warning, this does get pretty dark. It got to a point where I was just feeling so energyless, and so I just didn't have any energy or didn't care about anything, and it was really hard. And I think when I tried to take my life, I wasn't really deep down. I didn't want to die. It was a cry for help. I didn't know what to do with those feelings, or lack thereof, that I was experiencing, and that was the only thing I could think to do. So I tried to take my life on December 18th, and then on Christmas Day, and then again around a few days after New Year's. A little before New Year's, I talked to my parents because I realized, oh my gosh, this is really bad. I just tried to kill myself, and it just started to sink in how badly I was hurting and how much I really needed help. So I talked to my parents, and that was a really hard conversation. So we started, and during this time, it was still holiday break, so I couldn't see my therapist, because she was on break. So we started talking to my parents, like, what do? We emailed my therapist. She didn't get back to us right away. And then around New Year's, this was so hard. We started talking about whether or not I needed to go to the hospital. Like, my parents were really worried that they couldn't keep me safe in our house, and that was a really hard time, because, I mean, it was just such high tension. Like, my parents locked all our sharp objects up. I wasn't allowed to have any wires or cords in my room, like chargers, all of that stuff. It was a really hard time. But then, I got back from holiday break and talked to my therapist, and she sent me to day hospital, which is basically, think of it like day camp or VBS, but mental illness themed. I went to Shepherd Pratt, which is the hospital that I went to every single time in this story. I'm so grateful for all the staff at Shepherd Pratt. They are so kind and so helpful. I don't know where I would be without them. But I went to Shepherd Pratt Day Hospital, which is, instead of overnight, I think it's 9 to 3. So I went there for about a week, and I just talked to psychiatrists. We, switched around my medicine. We worked on all that. And I was feeling better by the end of that. I was really hoping that I was out of the woods. But I wasn't. Definitely was not. So then I came home after that, and I thought I was doing fine, but then I sunk into another depression. This one was even worse. Um, it got to a point where I wasn't doing school. The only thing I was doing was sitting in my bed, watching YouTube and eating, and that was really it. I wasn't doing any school, wasn't doing anything, no socializing, nothing. And that was the worst it got that month. And at that point, my parents were really concerned. They were like, again, can we keep him safe in our home under our watch? So again, they reached out to my therapist, and my therapist said, take him to the hospital. I don't feel like he's safe at home anymore. The unfortunate thing is when she said this, it was snowing and we couldn't get out of the house. So my parents, it wasn't that they didn't want to, they couldn't take me to the hospital. And unfortunately, my therapist heard about this and thought, okay, they're refusing to take him to the hospital. And so she jumped to conclusions and called CPS on my parents and then told them, I can't see your son anymore. I feel like you've broken my trust. And that was really hard. To this day, it still hurts because I ended up not being able to say goodbye. I ended up not being able to talk it out or anything. And I felt very betrayed and very sad. But the last time I saw her was the last day I came in and she sat me down. She said, Tucker, I'm really worried about you. And she said, I think you need to go to the hospital. And I was like, oh, day hospital again. I don't mind. She's like, no, you need to go to inpatient. Inpatient is overnight. So I would be there 24/7 without my parents. And, like, I can't leave the hospital. And that was very startling. But I was kind of in shock. And I wasn't as surprised as I had expected to be. So, she pulled my parents in. She explained to them, I want you to take Tucker to the hospital right now. I don't want him to go home. So we went to the hospital, and on the way to the hospital, I found out that she wasn't seeing me again. On the way to the hospital, or no, not on the way to the hospital, at the hospital. So the way Shepherd Pratt works is they have a crisis, like, I don't know what it was called, like a crisis unit thing. Basically, you can walk in and a crisis clinic, I don't know. You walk in and they will talk to you and they will try to find a place for you to stay and decide where you need to stay. So when I walked in, we were talking it out with the person there, like, where should Tucker go? Should he go to inpatient or day hospital or whatever? And the lady was like, oh, when I see you have a CPS report. And I was like, what is she talking about? And my mom had to sit down and explain to me, I'm sorry, you're not going to see Miss Erin again. And that was such a rough blow, because I was already having such a bad day, because I didn't have any of my stuff, and I was going to a hospital that I'd never, like, a different section of the hospital that I'd never been to before, and that was just salt to the wound. That was an awful experience to have. So, next, I'm going to go into more detail, because we're now at the first inpatient stay. So, inpatient. After we talked to a nurse, and she's like, yes, I'm sorry, I think Tucker needs to stay at inpatient for a while. I don't think he can stay safe at home. After that, they don't let you leave the clinic out. They have a special little hallway behind the clinic that walks you straight to inpatient. So I took my stuff and I walked to inpatient, and I remember the heart-pounding terror and anxiety I felt when I sat down at one of the tables in the little cafeteria at the inpatient and watched as my parents walked out without me. That was a really hard moment, and that was, it was just so hard, but it got worse. And this is the happy story. I mean, I loved Inpatient, but it was still terrifying. So I just sat there. The people tried to give me food, but I was like, I'm not hungry. So after that, I just sat there, and there were these really, really kind nurses. They sat me down, they talked to me, they chatted with me, they said, hey, if you need to chat, come to us. My parents came back and brought me clothing, books, as much as they were allowed to bring. Like, we're not allowed to have strings, we're not allowed to have hardcover books because they're considered weapons, anything that could be potentially dangerous. Anyway, after my parents left for the second time, this time I had my books, they brought me to my bedroom, my room, that I'd be staying at until the mail inpatient opened up. So let me explain something that I didn't explain. There are 3 types of inpatient. There's the female inpatient for young adults, so 12 to 18 for females, 12 to 18 for males, and then there's the crisis basically the holding place where all inpatient patients stay until their assigned place, a bed in their assigned place opens up. So I was down there in like the holding inpatient, mixed in with females and males and adults and kids. It's like everyone mixed in until they go to their assigned inpatient buildings. So they showed me to my room, and it was very white and blank, which stressed me out. I need texture. I need a little bit of... It was almost understimulating, which stressed me out. It was like white walls, a simple bed with a cot and a blanket and a pillow. It was a lot. Or it was so little that it almost felt overstimulating. But I sat down, I put my clothes in a little cubby dresser thing and my books, and I went into the bathroom. The bathroom just had a toilet, a bathroom, and a shower. It was actually kind of nice to have my own little room, and it helped me feel a little better. But anyway, as soon as I like unpacked all my stuff, they came in and they were like, "Hey, guess what? A bed opened up on the male inpatient unit, so you get to go upstairs now." So I had to gather up all my stuff, and a nurse came down and brought me upstairs, and then that was kind of when I fell apart, because my parents walked with me to the holding inpatient area, but then I had to walk by myself with this strange nurse that I never met before to the male inpatient unit, and she's like, "Here's your bedroom," and I had to put all my stuff away. And this time, because it was like bedtime at this point, like none of the nurses, all the nurses were like sitting in the little nurses station, and there was no one talking to me to encourage me, and so this time I was a lot more anxious. And then I set all my stuff down and I shut the door and I just started sobbing. I was so afraid, so helpless. I didn't know what to do, and I just sat there on my bed in the dark and sobbed. And at one point I felt better because 2 really nice nurses came in to check my vitals, and they were encouraging me and letting me know it's gonna be okay, and that was really encouraging, just to have someone let me know it's gonna be okay. But I admit I did cry myself to sleep, which is something I've never done since, and I had never done before. That was one of the most hard nights I've ever had to sleep through. I mean, I thought I'm never gonna fall asleep, but I did. And then the next morning came, and that was just as hard. I would say the first 24 hours in an inpatient stay is always the hardest. I woke up, and they don't like come in and say, "Hey, it's time to wake up." They bang on your door, "Tucker, it's time to wake up." And they don't yell at you. They're not like, "Wake up or we'll drag you out of bed." They're not mean. But they do... It's very brusque. It's very, like, jarring. And so it was hard to be woken up like that. And it was also hard because I woke up and I was like, "Where am I?" And I panicked for a second, and then I remembered where I was, and that was still hard because, like, I'm in the hospital because I tried to kill myself and I can't stay safe at home. So that was overwhelming. And then it was so scary. I changed and I walked out of my room and I sat down, and there were so many kids all talking around me. All the kids had been there for at least a day or two, so they already knew the names of the other kids and the names of the nurses, and I felt so alone and so just out of my zone and confused. But as the day went on, I was introduced to the nurses, introduced to the psychiatrists and the patients, and I felt a lot better. I ended up staying in that inpatient unit for about a week. In inpatient, they do a variety of things. You talk to a psychiatrist who works on adjusting your meds as needed. You talk to a social worker and a nurse, a mental health worker. Excuse me. I'll edit that out later. You talk to a nurse, you talk to basically everyone in the medical field, And then when you're not doing that, you're doing exercises, like interpersonal exercises. Basically, it's basically like camp, over sleepaway camp, but mental health themed. And you just do that all week. It does get boring and it does get stressful to not, because you're not allowed to leave the hospital, and that can get claustrophobic, but you're allowed, they take you to the gym sometimes, so it's not that bad. You're allowed to watch movies, and it can be entertaining at times because some of the patients are interesting. While I was there, one of the I almost mixed a name in with the words patients, and I'm not allowed to say names. One of the patients crawled up into the ceiling. It was like a popcorn ceiling. I think that's what they're called. Yeah, it's a popcorn ceiling, where, like, there are tiles, and they're, like, I don't know. Anyway, one of the patients crawled up into the ceiling. That was entertaining. Even though the nurses didn't find it entertaining, I found it entertaining. But yeah, I stayed there for a week. I think it was February 19th to February 26th. And then I came out of the hospital and I met my new therapist, and then we started having therapy together, and things went on as normal, and I thought, this is over, I'm better, this is good, but I was not good, and this was not over. In March, the end of March, I started having suicidal thoughts again. I started sinking to another depression. I might need to pause this video in case my cousins are too loud. Go away. Okay. As I was saying, the depression was not over. I sunk into another depression. There were more suicidal thoughts. It got to a point where there was one day when it was especially unseasonably warm, or maybe it was seasonally warm. I don't know. It was end of March, so maybe it wasn't unseasonable. It was warm, and my siblings were outside playing and trying to build a fort, and they asked me to join them. I was like, no thank you. And then I went inside, and I had some stomach issues, and that just pushed me down further, and I was really upset. I was really feeling down, and I just locked myself in my closet, and trigger warning, I looked at the belts that were hanging off of my hangers, and I thought I could just wrap those around my neck and end it now. And that was a really hard moment because I realized it was terrifying how serious those thoughts were, and how, like, it wasn't like a normal intrusive where I was like, no way, I'm not going to do that. It was like an actual thing that I considered, and to this day that makes me shudder. I really feel bad for anyone who has to experience that. It is not fun to feel like your life is pointless and to feel like you don't want to keep going, because it's so hard to feel like there's any hope from that moment. But my mom came in and she wanted me to come outside, and I refused. She tried to unlock the door, but I refused to unlock it. She ended up getting it unlocked, and she made me sit out with her in the kitchen, and she was talking to me. And at first I thought, okay, I'll just be really upset, and I'll go to, we had homeschool co-op the next day, which, for those of you who don't know, homeschool co-op is basically where a bunch of homeschool families get together and do a day of school. So I thought, I'll just go to co-op tomorrow, and everything will go as normal. But then my mom said, I don't believe that you'll go to co-op, and I realized she was right. I didn't think I could get the energy to go to co-op that next day, and she's like, I feel like I don't feel comfortable leaving you home tomorrow because I'm afraid that you'll try to kill yourself. And so, again, we went to the hospital. Once again, we went to the crisis clinic. Once again, I was put in the holding inpatient area. This time, though, I was in that holding inpatient for, I think it was 5 days, versus the usual day or 2, or versus the, 2 hours I was in it the first time. So it got really boring, because in the holding inpatient, it's not as rigorous. Like, they don't do group work, they don't do talking to doctors and psychiatrists as much. You really just sit around and watch TV, and it extremely boring. I got so bored and so tired. It was just the worst. And I was in there for 5 days. And those days don't technically count as your days, because usually doctors want you to stay in inpatient for a week or more, if depending on the patient. But it's a minimum of a week, and those 5 days didn't count as my week. So I technically was supposed to stay in there for 12 days. I didn't, but after those 5 days, I moved up to the male inpatient and started actually doing group work and talking to doctors more. We switched my medicine from Prozac to Zoloft, and that helped a lot with the depression and the suicidal thoughts. And at that point, towards the end of my stay at inpatient, I was diagnosed with OCD, because it really helped describe all the things I was going through. We realized that the suicidal thoughts I was having, they were real, and they were suicidal thoughts, but they were mostly OCD. They were my brain perseverating on the same thought over and over and over again. We realized that I've always had OCD. We just thought that the obsessing was ADHD, and I also have ADHD. We just realized that OCD was definitely a big part of all the stuff that was going on inside my head. So I left with that diagnosis, and that ended up being a very, very helpful diagnosis. It helps us get me more accurate help and helpful help. So, I came out of inpatient in April, and then life threw me another curveball. Well, first of all, after my second inpatient stay, I ended up doing day hospital after inpatient instead of just doing inpatient to home as a more slower transition. So I did day hospital for another week, so I ended up basically being in and out of the hospital from the end of March till Easter. So yeah, that was a long thing. That was a long stay at the hospital. After my week at inpatient, and then my week, I think it was a week or two at day hospital, it was time for spring break, and so I was really excited. I was like, I'm gonna get to see my cousins and my family, it'll be all good, and I'll have fun. No, can you guess where this is going? You probably can't. You're probably thinking another depression, but you would be wrong. I had a seizure. Fun. I got to and that's something I didn't mention. In January, I had my first seizure. We thought it was a fluke. We got an EEG. There were no abnormalities. We thought, okay, it was just a fluke. But then in April, I went to my grandparents' house, and I had another seizure. I got there, I was outside running around with my cousins, and I felt just off, and I was like, what is going on? And then I realized, I think I'm gonna have a seizure. Now, this is something I didn't know about. There are things called auras, or most likely, usually they're also called focal seizures. Basically, it's something that if you ask someone to describe it, they'll say, I just can't. It's like a feeling that comes over you, and you just know, okay, this is a seizure. And I don't know how to describe it. The best I can describe it is like a feeling that you're dreaming, along with tingly and numbness and out of body. And it was an awful feeling, and I felt that, and I just thought to myself, I'm about to have a seizure. So I found my mom and said, Mom, I'm gonna have a seizure, I can feel it coming. So I went upstairs, I sat in my bedroom, or in the same bedroom at my grandparents' house, and I don't remember what happened after that, because the seizure did come. And then the next thing, I woke up like 10 minutes later. I was on the floor, and there were people around me. My aunt was there. My aunt is a nurse. She was like checking my blood pressure, making sure my heart didn't stop, because my heart rate got really, really low. After that, I stood up and I was like, I don't know what's going on. I was nauseous and dizzy and confused, and all I remember is standing up, walking down the stairs, and then the rest of the way I couldn't really stand, so my parents and aunt had to carry me to an ambulance, because they had called an ambulance, because the seizure went longer than 5 minutes, and if it goes longer than 5 minutes, it can start causing brain damage, I think. I don't really know much about seizures. Even though I think I know I have a seizure disorder, but I don't know if it's technically epilepsy. So I got in the ambulance, and I was really nauseous and confused. But ironically, in all that confusion, all that anxiety and nausea and all of that. When I was driving, the only one thought I had was, oh, this is cool. I can see out the back window. We're going backwards. Even though we weren't. We were driving forwards, and I was seeing out the back window. I was really loopy. I don't really remember what happened after that. Being at the hospital was very hazy. Somehow an IV ended up in my arm. I don't remember that happening. But I was in the hospital. They kept an eye on me. I was fine. There was nothing, again, nothing weird with my brain. No other symptoms, just a seizure. We didn't know why it happened. I stayed in the hospital from around, I think it was around 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. Just, they were keeping an eye on me. But again, nothing weird, so we left. And I got home. Now, before I go into this story, here is a picture of me in the hospital. Look at me, I'm so miserable. Actually, in that picture, I wasn't that miserable, even though I look really tired. I was just tired, and I wanted to go home. Anyway, after the seizure, after the hospital, I came home, and I spent the rest of Easter weekend, and it was fine. There was no other activity, no nothing. It was all good. I mean, oops, don't fall over. There we go. I was super, please don't fall over, camera. I was very, very, very sore because, again, my muscles were seizing up and contracting really, really strongly. Like, I mean, I don't know how many of you have ever seen a seizure, but it's pretty violent. So I was really sore. I felt like I just ran, like, a marathon. So the rest of the weekend was fine. But then around May, I started to have, like, nightmares and dreams that I was having seizures. I started to get really, my anxiety mimics whatever I'm afraid of. So my anxiety will mimic stomach aches. It will mimic depression. And now it started to mimic my seizures. And so over the summer, I sunk into another depression. This time, because of the medicine and because of the therapy, it was without the suicidal thoughts. Thank goodness. But I did sink into depression the entire summer, and it wasn't as bad either, which is really good. But the entire summer, I just spent my time watching YouTube, eating, barely socializing, reading, and actually, I looked at my stats on Goodreads. I wrote the most reviews I've ever written in the month of July than I did the entire year of 2018. Like, I was just basically reading, eating, reviewing, and that's it. I was not socializing, I was not going outside, wasn't exercising, and it was really bad. But then, around the end of July, something just clicked. I don't know what it was, and I honestly don't know. I really only attribute it to therapy, prayer, and whatever else is out there. But something just clicked, and I got a burst of energy, and I was like, I am sick and tired of being sick and tired. So I got out of bed, and I started putting the work in, and I did start to feel a lot better. In August, I did sink again, but it was more of an anxious sink, because school was coming, and then school came, and that was just the deal breaker for me. It helped tremendously. I got out of my depression. I started socializing. Because of gym, I was forced to exercise, and I started making friends. I started going to clubs, and now we're here. I'm doing immensely better than I was last year. So much better. To stop the video. It's 9:30, so I can be in my pajamas. Don't judge me. Anywho, after the rude interrupters, here we go. Action. Ow! That hurt. Action. So, as I was saying, I'm doing so much better. I think I have improved greatly over the last year. Thanks to prayer, thanks to my faith, thanks to, my therapy, and my hard work. It sucks, but I hate to say this because I ask so many people, when will this get better? Will I ever get better? And people are like, it'll get better, and you just have to wait, but I don't really think that's true. You can't just sit around and wait for things to get better. You have to put the work in, and I hate it. I know it sucks that you have to, because you don't want to put the work in when you're in those things, in those moods, and in those depressions and anxiety moments, but you have to, and you don't have to do something big like go to school or get outside. Just take the little tiny steps. You get out of bed, that's a step. You eat when you need to, that's a step. The more and more you take tiny steps, the easier it will be to take them, and the easier it will be to take bigger steps. And if you only do one tiny step a day, those steps will add up and they will get easier, and slowly you will get better. My tip for those going through depression, anxiety, mental illness is 1. Find someone to talk to, a friend, a therapist, a teacher, anyone who will listen. Even if you're talking to a stuffed animal, it's helpful. Or write it down in a journal. Just get it out of you. Also, exercise. It sucks. I hate exercising, but it seriously does help. Swimming, biking, anything. Just move your body a little bit. And finally, my biggest tip is patience. It sucks that you have to wait, but you do. You're not going to get better overnight. It's not going to just happen like that. You have to wait, and it will happen. I promise you. You don't think it will, but it will. You will get better very slowly, but it's going to happen. Yeah, that's my story about my mental illness journey. I'm sure it's not over. I, to this day, continue to struggle with depression, apathy, anxiety, and OCD. And I don't think I will ever stop struggling, and I don't expect to. But I know now that I have the strength and the ability to get through it, and not to make it go away, but to live in spite of it. And I think that's the big thing. You can't expect your anxiety or depression to go away. It's okay to hope that it will get better a little bit and ease up, but I think a more realistic goal is to live in spite of it. And it sucks, I know, but the more you do it, the easier it will get. And once you start living in spite of your anxiety and depression and PTSD and OCD and ADHD, you'll realize that it will start to go away. The less you feed it, the more you ignore it, the easier it is to bear that burden. Yeah. As I said, I'm going to leave the links to all the relevant and appropriate hotlines in the description. Once again, do not feel like you can't talk to them because that means you're at your worst. It doesn't. You sometimes just need someone to talk to, and that is okay. For those watching, if this struck something in you, let me know. I'm really happy to talk to you, to give you any more tips, to answer any questions. I can't promise that I will be able to help you completely, and I can't promise that this video will have given you some life-changing tip, but I really want to do my best to help anyone watching this. Oh, one more thing I did want to say. On the note of mental hospitals, everyone's experience is different. And on mental hospitals and mental illnesses, everyone's experience is different. My experience may not be your experience. My tips may not apply to your mental illnesses. And along with mental hospitals, I went to Shepherd Pratt, which is a very good mental hospital. But not every mental hospital is the same. So I can't promise that you'll experience the same thing. Thank you for watching this video. I really hope it encouraged you some way, somehow. If you need to chat or have any questions, please let me know. I'm always open. Thank you so much for watching, and I wish you all the best in your journey with mental illness. Bye. How's it going? Stop it! You interrupted me. I want to see how it's going, and I'm so glad you have a new iPhone. It's cool. So, what are you talking about? What part are you talking about? You'll see. Go away. How many times were you in Shepherd Pratt? Like 4? Wait. Yeah, 4. How do you use the DSM IVTR? Because I can. But you don't need it. Just in case. That makes no sense. Okay. Go away. Also, guess what? I'm in my pajamas because I can be and because I'm lazy and it's like 8 p.m. What time is it? What time is it?
Hello? Oh, are you filming?
Yes.
On your new iPhone? Is the camera better?
Oh my gosh, yes. Flick.
Does it have a better microphone?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I've never felt more like a teen than I do right now.
Why?
Because of the whole crush thing. That's such a
you
classic teenager
Careful what you say. I'm not going to include this, but careful what you say.
I don't care. You can include it. Like Buddy would say, I'm in love, and I don't care. He knows it. Insert that clip. They'll understand.
I don't think I'm going to insert any of this, because this is like a somber... I'm talking about my mental health journey.
Oh. I went there, too. Ow!
That didn't... Okay.
Wait. Ow! That actually hurt. Can I talk about it with you?
No.
Okay.
Go away. Go.
What are you...
Shoot.
What are you going to talk about?
Everything. You'll see it in the video. Shoot.
Are you going to talk about Miss Casey and how nice she is?
No, I can't say names.
Oh! Whoops. There's a nice lady. I won't... Ow! She's nice. She knows who she is. There's also Miss Bailey.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about Miss Bailey.
Miss Bailey was really nice. She helped me through a thought spiral. Okay, bye.
Okay. Where was I?